So there's been a lot of tension between the unions and the Labour Party in recent months, given a lot of U-turns on pro-Labour positions from the Labour Party, ironically, and Keir Starmer clearly chasing money from outside the union sphere by looking for donations from businesses. We've seen there's been much talk about the potential for rich donors to get involved in Labour Party financing. Alistair Campbell, indeed, with Prospect, wrote a flyer to be able to be distributed to potential donors to let them know how they could influence future Labour Party policy through the fact that they are donating. They even said that they were happy to overrule the conference to be able to let rich donors have more of their hands on what policy was being engaged in. And this has driven further rifts between the unions and the Labour Party. Unite have stripped back their funding to only the cost of affiliation with the party. The Bakers Union have disaffiliated from the party. And people like Dave Ward have come up publicly and said that he thinks the Labour Party isn't doing enough for the Labour movement in general. One of the things that's been talked about on the left is pushing for more unions to disaffiliate from the party to try and potentially show that Labour not representing the interests of the unions, blocking unions from being able to have influence in candidate selection, on influence on policy when it's clear they want to be able to ignore things like the NPF and the conference, where the unions, as part of their affiliation, have access to voting rights, have access to candidate selections, and access to be able to promote and recommend candidates for these kind of positions. It's very clear that the influence of the unions on the party as a platform is concerned. These opportunities are very, very thin. Now, this came to a head today, in fact, where there was a vote at the Unite AGM about potential disaffiliation from the Labour Party, and it's turned out that they are going to stay affiliated to the party. So it's going to maintain its historic links with Labour, as its chief warned party leader Keir Starmer to listen to the union's demands amid a rift between the two organisations. Sharon Graham told the debate at Unite's Rules Conference in Brighton on Monday, "It is not the time for disaffiliation, as it seeks to influence the party if it wins power at the next general election, expected next year." Of course, not really much of a rift, given that Keir Starmer is apparently supposed to be speaking at this event, so I'm not sure how much of a rift that really points it to, but regardless, either way, I'm sceptical of this idea that Unite are going to have some kind of grand influence over Labour when they've already pulled the plug on as much funding as they can without disaffiliating, and they've not had any potential influence on how the party is functioning at the moment. Sharon Graham's called out the weaponisation of the party policy against Jeremy Corbyn, called out candidate deselections like Jamie Driscoll, has called out the lack of actually proper pro-union policy from the party. And has the Labour Party establishment changed their opinion on any of this? No, they've not changed any of this stuff at all. This idea that even by staying affiliated you have this kind of grand influence, I'm pretty sceptical of the claims that are being made here by Sharon Graham. She said there'd be no blank cheques for Labour leader as she urged him to deliver on jobs, pay and conditions. On the back of that, the delegates actually apparently overwhelmingly remain affiliated. "This is the moment of maximum leverage for the union where we can hold Labour to account. Now cannot be the time to walk away, we'd be weakening our own arm." Walking away is the way in which you're going to be able to hold them to account. You've used all the leverage at your disposal already by reducing the amount of funding, by engaging how you can within the party mechanisms, and it's amounted to nothing. You're getting nothing for your money. Unite members are getting nothing for their political donations to the Labour Party. Why not spend that money on actual and genuine Unite political projects that have been able to properly influence policy from the Conservative government? Unite political campaigns have reduced the amount of private sector subcontracting in the NHS. Part of their own negotiations with the Conservative government has managed to get concessions on the amounts of people who are being employed through subcontractors, and they're now employed directly. That's as a result of a good thing that Unite do, which is have a political fund that is used for non-union political projects. But that project shouldn't be the fucking Labour Party, because it's not actually going to lead to any concessions on policy. If there was concessions that would have been given, they would have been given already. Labour must be Labour, and the union must push them into that position. We must make them take different choices. We will not make the same mistakes of the past. There'll be no blank cheques for Labour until we see tangible results. Which, again, I'm very sceptical that they have any position to be able to properly influence how the party is functioning at this point. I mean, it's good to hear her say things that Westminster politics is not a priority, but as I said, the political fund is good. I'm glad they voted to keep the political fund, and I'm glad that one of Sharon Graham's main positions that she's had while she's been GenSec is to focus on kind of bread and butter, jobs, pay conditions, genuine political movements outside of Westminster politics. And that's great, that's fine, I like that. But while you're still doing that as part of a Labour Party affiliation, what do you get out of it? What do you get out of any of this? while she's here saying you're criticising us beyond belief that Rachel Reeves' refusal to commit to endorsing the recommendations of the peer review bodies, I'm like, if what you've done so far hasn't changed that, what's the point? What's the point in being affiliated anymore? So I really don't have much faith that this is going to lead to any actual genuine material change. Sharon Graham has described this as a shot across the bows, but if there was a shot across the bows, all of the stripped funding already would clearly have been the warning shot. And Labour don't care. They're swanning off getting Lord Sainsbury donating, the CEO of Autoglass donating, billionaires switching allegiance from the Conservative to the Labour Party. And you think they're going to care about whether or not Unite are affiliated or not? No, disaffiliate. Spend that money in a manner that's going to benefit your own members rather than the Labour Party, which clearly isn't acting in your interests. Of course, I'm not a Unite member. It's not up to me. They voted to remain affiliated. It's not just Sharon Graham I'm speaking to. It's Unite members. If you're a Unite member, I don't think this is in your best interest. It's my opinion, right? You can disagree with that, but just look at the evidence. Look at the evidence of how little extra you're getting. Lots of Unite members are public sector employees. And Labour is saying that they won't even give you the pay review body increase that was the main reason given why they couldn't meet union demands and why they couldn't give inflationary pay rises. What are you getting for your money if some of that money is going to the Labour Party? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, she was on Radio 4 earlier on today to discuss this, so we'll have to see what she does indeed say about this and how she justifies her recommendation to the membership that they should not break the union link and they should remain affiliated. Let's have a look.
Now, then, Labour's biggest donors, Unite, have voted to maintain its historic links with the Labour Party. But the trade union's boss says the debate at its conference should be read as a warning to Sir Keir Starmer. So far this year, they've handed over more than £1 million. Asked the General Secretary, Sharon Graham, why the debate about funding and its vote had even happened.
Well, I think what it says, and the fact that this question has been raised, is that workers are not happy with some of the things that Labour are doing. And I do think that it should be seen as a shot across Labour's bows. The important thing for the conference is that what they want is they want the workers' voice to be heard. We have a party that sticks up for business. It's called the Conservative Party. What we want is Labour to be Labour and to make sure that they are fighting for workers. And these members here, these delegates here, aren't seeing that.
Give me an example of the kind of thing that you either hear from Labour or...
These are all good criticisms. These were criticisms that we should have been hearing a year and a half ago. You've had plenty of time to shoot across the bows as far as Labour are concerned. You've had plenty of time to fire the warning shots, and you've done very little up to this point. Labour are not going to feel on notice because you voted to continue your affiliation. It's up to the membership. They're a democratic organisation, far be from me to try and impose myself upon internal Unite democratic processes. I don't see what the Unite members are getting from any of this.
Or don't hear from Labour that makes you think not good enough.
Well, I suppose, ranging from things like not adopting the PRB on public services.
Just to be clear, that's the pay review body.
And remember, these are people that went out in the pandemic, that risked their lives in the pandemic. And to say that 6%, that they're not worth 6%, I think is an outrage, and our members think that's an outrage.
Right.
But you've also got things like our steel industry that's on the basis of collapse.
Just so that people know what we're talking about, on the pay review body, it was for teachers. We understand the recommendation is for 6.5%. And Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, said yesterday she hadn't seen the recommendations. She wasn't going to comment on it, but she wouldn't commit to saying, yes, we sign up to whatever they recommend. And that's what...
Well, this is an outrage, is it? Yes, and we're going to write a letter, a strongly worded letter, telling you how angry we are. And we will be very angry. Will we do anything? Well, no, unfortunately not. We're going to influence Labour when they're in power. How much influence did Unite have over Labour during the entirety of the Blair administration, whilst they were selling out the dock workers, whilst they were privatising extra parts of the rail network? Did Unite really have any genuine influence over a gigantic Labour majority by a right-wing Prime Minister who didn't really actually properly care about the union movement at all? Get real.
What you're saying is not good enough.
Whether it's the pay review body and not committing, or whether it's the fact that when we're on dispute in the health service and again not committing, or whether it's the fact when there's striking workers making comment about striking workers and MPs on picket lines, there's a feeling that Labour are not coming out fully supporting workers. And for me, and for them winning the next election, if they want to win the next election, then people have to feel they've got something to vote for. They've got to feel that different choices are being made.
What Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says that she's doing is that she's been very clear that Labour's fiscal rules are absolutely non-negotiable. Now, she has a job in order to persuade the electorate that Labour is not going to be profligate, is going to be sensible with the money, doesn't she?
Well, I think it comes down to choices, doesn't it? I mean, we are a £2.5 trillion economy, and so it depends on what choices you make. So an example that I've given to Keir and to Rachel is that when you look at energy companies making £170 billion profit, and you've got a black hole of 30 billion, and you've got other things that need to be filled like the NHS pay, why are we not choosing to look at those huge profits and use some of that money to make different choices? And so whether it's that or the renationalisation of energy, which we have done a very detailed paper on, it would cost £90 billion on book price. What is the problem about making those types of choices instead of making choices that's going to plummet this country into austerity Mark II?
Labour was Labour until they got into power. Once they got into power, they got closer to the politicians and further away from those they actually represented. It's hardly surprising we've got a Labour Party that doesn't represent the Labour force. We need new Labour representation, preferably headed up by the likes of the RMT union leader Mick Lynch. Can't see it getting traction anytime soon, but it's needed. Well, 100%. I mean, the RMT are affiliated to the Trade Unionist Socialist Coalition, which didn't really have a massive base, though. I think there needs to be more proper union funding from the rest of the unions affiliated in creating a new party potentially, but I don't think that's going to get much traction against the existing Labour Party under first past the post either. We're in a real bind, unfortunately, with this stuff, with just a completely immovable object in the form of Sir Keir Starmer and all of his cronies at the top of the party. You know, with people like Morgan McSweeney who only really care about perceived electability, when apparently doing the things that Sharon Graham's saying here, like renationalisation, which are widely supported by the public, are seen as not electorally viable, which makes no fucking sense to me. If it's something the public want, then do it. The Union bloc grants showing their condition will be a great thing. Yeah, 100%, 100%. Labour are happy to get Tory funding and political influence coming at the expense of those that put Labour there in the first place. And that's it. When you look at, say, water nationalisation, where you have people who are very close to the Labour Party, who are having secret meetings with water industry bosses to try and come up with policy to try and stop nationalisation, then you know that there are conflicting interests at play here. And once you have a Labour Party who is issuing their Labour roots to the union movement and are starting letting billionaires and CEOs and company directors be the architects of Labour policy, overriding the AGM, overriding the conference, overriding the National Policy Forum, overriding the unions, then as Sharon Graham pointed out there, you have a Labour Party that just look like the Conservative Party, who are just the party of business. But now we have, as Noam Chomsky would put it, we have one party in the UK, the Business Party, which comes in Conservative and Labour forms. I'm opposed to the policies that they put forward, as are most of the population. And when it comes to economic policy, that's basically true.
On pay from some is that, look, they must not do anything that would be inflationary or be seen to be inflationary.
But to be honest, without just trying to sort of put this in a straight way, that is total toffee, because actually the real driver of the inflation at the moment isn't pay. The pay rises are way too low for that to be the case. It's actually rampant profiteering. The companies in the FTSE 350, their profit margin has gone up by 89% from 2019 to this year. Their margin of profit. That is what's driving inflation. And so therefore, why is that not being tackled? Why are they saying to the country, take a national pay cut, while they're allowing these ridiculous amounts of profits in a very small number of people's hands? Deal with that, and they may start dealing with inflation.
There is another issue Labour's being pushed about at the moment, which is the decisions on various candidates and members who are coming under investigation. It's led to the Labour MP John Cruddas to...
Again, as you say, Deletion Quarter in chat, until they support disaffiliation, why would you be on the same side? Yeah, I absolutely agree. You should still be obviously a member of the union, as you say, as a union supporter. But how are we on the same side if they're working to continue to put these people in number 10? The fact that the CWU haven't even talked about disaffiliation. At least Unite had a vote. At least Unite put it to the members and they rejected it. I don't even get that from CWU.
Who say that the party's fallen under the control of a right-wing illiberal faction embarking on a witch hunt. Do you agree with him?
What I'm interested in is workers and what's happening to my members. And what I do think is that if you eradicate every worker's voice out of the Labour Party, then you end up with policies that workers do not want. And so for me, it's about the issues, not individuals. If people are being taken out because they support the renationalisation of energy or they support procurement into UK steel, then what you end up with a party that isn't going to be representative of workers. And that's why I think so many people in the trade union movement are questioning the direction.
Do you think that's why they've been taken out?
Well, I definitely think there is a link between the types of issues that some of these MPs are supporting and them being removed.
Sharon Graham of Unite.
She's absolutely right. not only is there a factional disagreement here that's causing a lot of these removals from long lists, expulsions from the party, this rift that's forming within the party over these issues. There's an ideological link here too, in that they don't want people who will support the things that Sharon Graham is quite rightly saying that the Labour Party should be supporting at this time. But on top of that, it's factional. I was actually speaking to my parents about this yesterday, that I don't think a lot of it is to do with as much with ideology as it is with factionalism. It's less about whether or not they believe certain things. There are probably plenty of melt people in the Labour Party, like kind of meltoids, who really do think that nationalisation would be nice but we can't afford it, rather than being opposed to it like the Blairites are, just ideologically opposed to this nationalisations and the supremacy of the market economy, like neoliberal style. But they would be happy to support the Labour leadership even if they didn't support the policies that they like. But really and truly, especially when it comes to PLP candidate selections in CLPs, it's just about loyalty. It's who they think will vote with the leadership when it comes to passing right-wing policy in government. And as long as they get a bunch of pro-Starmer yes men into PLP, it really doesn't matter what their initial ideology is. But of course, the kind of people who are less likely to continue following the party line, with Starmer going right-wing in government, are people who also believe in left-wing policies, because of course, the opposition to right-wing policies from Keir Starmer would come from people with a left-wing ideology. Of course it would be. But, really and truly, it's about who they believe is going to be good little MPs in the PLP who will happily toe the party line and obey the whips without question. People like Chris Curtis, pollster from YouGov, for example, rather than, genuine, principled socialists, people like Greg Marshall, people like Lee Drennan, etc., etc. Lee Drennan, good friend of Angela Rayner, how much has she said about candidates being removed from long lists? In fact, she was quite happy to wash her hands of this stuff in the interview we watched the other day, which is genuinely pathetic. And we're seeing a lot of pathetic behaviour in the Labour Party at the moment, from unions, from members, from members of the PLP, right, members of the SCG. In fact, the SCG have been pathetic throughout all of this, with their continual strongly worded letters and no genuine concrete action to try and move the policy base over. So again, this is why I've joined the Green Party. I don't see any chance for progressive change coming from the Labour Party. And why should I spend my time campaigning, voting, thinking about them when I could be trying to move them left through an electoral attack on them through the Green Party? Because again, when you've got Morgan McSweeney at the helm, whose only metric he cares about is whether or not they're going to win the election, then the only thing you can do to influence them is tell them you're not going to vote for them, to join another party, to dislocate yourself from the Labour establishment. Because as soon as you give your vote over to them with no recourse whatsoever, they can take you for granted and they will never want to appeal to you ever. They will not do anything that's in your interest. So why bother? It's as simple as that. But same goes for the unions. If you're not going to get anything for your money, as far as the unions are concerned, why would you still be there in the Labour Party? You're not going to influence policy when they've already shown you they're very happy to go to the rich rather than the unions for policy, and to override the unions on policy. So, silly decision as far as I'm concerned. Just hope my union does better on this one. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.